Right. Right, Hunggan. Okay, Matotsoy live stream. Hunggan. Okay. Right, kaya hit gi YouTube, gi Instagram, zan gi Facebook. Lokwi na izun rato. Okay. All right, naizun rato. Naizun rato. Dispensa lang kumatot first. Okay. Okay. All right. Hogo matotso. Biba. All right, energy. All right. Okay. Hafade todos hamzugwana hudson yestigi no webu na episode fanatsu. Wahui host Mizu Tablu. Si Michael Honda Bakwa. And Hungan, you're just gonna have to listen to me for a little bit, and then we are going to hand the episode off to our esteemed guest, Hungan. Esti nakabadzero gof importante gi comunidad. Hungan gof digno na esti na tautau si Tun Juan Benavente. Hungan hasungan I menakari guerra. He is a Chamorro War survivor. So mauna gi servicio lokwi. He is a Chamorro who served in the Vietnam War. Lo esti na tautau Tumatsu za Manyauna gi grupo Nasion Chamoru. He also marched with Anghet Santos as well. He is somebody who has protested for Chamorro rights. And so it is a great honor and privilege that he joins today for a Liberation Day episode of Fanatsu. Because what better person to talk about what Liberation Day means to them than somebody who has been through World War II, here in Guam, somebody that has served in the US military, but somebody who has also protested for Chamorro rights, Chamorro land return, and so on. And so, gof magof zunay na ha excepto who combida guinay seso who combida si Senyor Juan sa mega historianya. Mega interesante na historianya si Tun Juan. And so, gof magof na na ha excepta zan mapto guini magi para I Fanatsu podcast. Za posangani hit na I zonya reflections. But I champonya gi durante ni guerra. Lo I hinasonya lokwi. And I sutati gilina lanya, but Hafa esti liberacion paraguiza. What does Liberation Day mean to him? Looking back on his many years of life. And so, Senor Juan, Tun Juan, si Zeus Masi para ifinatomo para Fanatsu.
Buenos días, Manilu, Mananao, Manhoben, Manamco. Si Juan Cruz Benavente, Toto Dedo, Mafanago, Agosto 27, 1937. E familiar com Mantauto Dedo. Já em 1942, nasakan Guaha Achake, ni muna posible si totoo po haso na Mas maulik pa'y familia dyan manhano siya, pa'y alamtano, gihagas luncheon niya, giza matawag. 82 years ago, my family and two other families were hiding in the northern jungle of Guam. A tragic event prompted my dad to take us deep into the northern jungle to a place called Matawag. A family friend, John Acosta, was accused of hiding a radio and was running away and hiding. On several occasions, he stayed with my family. One day, he was invited to have lunch with three men. He was betrayed, ambushed, tied, and turned over to the Japanese police in Dededo. John was executed by firing squad at Pico Cemetery, and his family was forced to witness the execution. My father has the sad duty of transporting the remains of John back to Dededo, and he was buried in the family property in Tumon Bay. The following day, I was helping my dad wash the bull cart. It was bloody, and I asked him, where did the blood come from? He told me that he had transported John back to Dededo. So this very event triggered my dad to promptly think of ways to avoid Japanese. So he moved us deep into the northern jungle to a place called Matawag. Moving into the jungle gave us room and distance from the Japanese garrison that was stationed in Dededo. In 1943, my father was taken to the work camp in Tumon. He spent 7 days a week at the camp. On Sunday, he got to visit us, but he has to return to the camp in the evening. My two oldest siblings, 11 and 13, were detailed to work at the Halagua airfield. My brother Jesus and I and my sister Priscilla, 3 years old, are just too young. And so we stayed with mom at home in the jungle. Sometimes in 1944, my father came home from the camp. He immediately moved the family deeper into the jungle, realizing that the Americans had already landed since the camp was abandoned in Tumon and the Japanese were last seen headed towards Sagana. And so we stayed in the jungle, and one day we were in the open collecting coconuts and picking ripe papayas. A Japanese messenger found us, and we were instructed to assemble at the residence of Tun Pablo in Ukudu. Once we got into Ukudu, we were marched further north to the Estumbu Isangsung jungle. We have no Japanese guard except an Okinawan with a rifle. And so we stayed in the northern jungle again for about another 10 days. One evening, as the families were cooking their evening meal, an American spotter plane saw smoke coming up from the jungle floor. Thinking that he had discovered a Japanese camp, we were subjected to an artillery concentration that evening. People were wounded, some were killed. We ran east and landed at the home of the Tyron family, a small house, and some 300 of us were huddled around the small house. That evening, I witnessed the agonizing death of a young Chamoru man, his right leg nearly amputated. He was bleeding, screaming, crying all night. By morning, he was dead. We buried him in a shallow grave next to the house. Soon thereafter, another spotter plane found us and dropped a message that we are to head south and to stay at the gravel rock. We did that for about 2 hours. Somewhere along the line, we ran into Japanese withdrawing from the battlefield. Some were wounded. I saw a particular one that was, his right hand was hanging. They were firing to our left and to our front. We're suddenly now caught in a fight between American Marines and withdrawing Japanese troops. Shortly thereafter, we crossed into American lines, and this was about August the 5th, 1944. Once we crossed American lines, we were quickly transported by truck to the Pigo Cemetery. We were placed behind the Pigo Cemetery on the hillside, thousands of us out in the open. It was raining in the Ghana. The mountainside was muddy. We are in the open, no shelter, no water, no bathroom facilities. It was filthy, dirty. We were at Pigo maybe for about 7 days. As soon as Dededo was declared free, my father moved us back into Dededo. Remained at my grandfather's residence for about another week. On the second week, we were told to move, since the army was clearing the land for the Harmon Airfield. We moved east and landed in a place called Liguan. It's about a mile and a half away from the old village. We will stay at the Liguan camp until the summer of 1945. In the summer of 1945, the Dededo village was completed. Original families from Dededo moved into their new homes with a few outsiders. Shortly after we moved into the village, a B-29 coming back from bombing Japan ran out of fuel and crashed into the village. The northern part, an entire block, was burned. Some were occupied. However, the people got out in time. But the crew on the B-29 did not survive. The community was moving fast. Schools were open. Children were attending schools. Those that did not attend American school prior to the war were all placed on the same grade, regardless of age. But for us, the children, we didn't care. We're eager to learn and understand the English language. Chamoru is our home language, and many other teachers have no training in bilingual education for people whose home language is other than English. We struggled, but we made progress and continue on. In the new village of Dededo, there was a water system where you have a community bathroom, a shower, and a water point. And it will remain in this fashion for the next 7 years, and it will be 1953 and 1954 before water was available into the homes. The roads were gravel. There was no paved roads. One day, a truck full of old boots were dumped next to the police station. The word was, if it fits, it belongs to you. I was looking for a pair for myself. However, I did not find one that fits me. I found one 2 sizes too big. But I've been barefooted now for 8 years. I've roamed in the jungle, climbed trees barefooted. So I welcome my new boots. It will take me until my tour in Vietnam to understand where my boots came from. When a soldier or sailor or Marine dies in combat, he is dressed in full military uniform with new shoes. So it's safe to say that my boots in 1945 came from a soldier or Marine that had died in combat. In 1955, I enlisted into the U.S. Army. I spent my first 3 years in the Army with the 25th Infantry Division at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. I have served in Korea, Vietnam, and Germany. The highlights of my military career were the 7 years that I spent at the training center at Fort Ord, California, as an instructor of infantry tactics or a senior drill sergeant in an advanced training company. Additionally, I taught junior ROTC at George Washington High School in the year 1974, 75, and 76. I was an Army recruiter, an Army drill sergeant, a veteran of the Vietnam War. After my duty at George Washington High School, I was reassigned to the U.S. Army in Europe. I was assigned to the 1st Infantry Division. And in 1978, I was promoted to Master Sergeant E8, First Sergeant of Company B, 1st Battalion, 26th Infantry. After Germany, I was reassigned to U.S. Army Readiness Group and was an infantry senior advisor to an infantry battalion in Army Reserve and Army Guard. In 1 April 1982, I retired from the U.S. Army and returned to Guam. I've been in Guam and been active in the community since that time.
Sidus Mase Senor, thank you so much for sharing some of your background, and we have a number of people that are tuning in. For example, Richard Wittenbach Santos has tuned in. Unhaso si Richard Wittenbach Santos.
Howdy?
Si Dick Wittenbach Santos.
Hunggan.
Ilek niya na sesun bisita class niya. Giunabet sa Guahan. Hunggan. And so one of the things that when you were talking, one of the things that I wanted to reflect on, somebody is asking, Senor, how old were you when the war began? How old were you when the war ended?
I was born in 1937. So in 1944, I was going on 4. By the time the Americans landed in Guam, I'm 7. By the time the war is over, I'm 80 years old.
Oh, and again, we have more people that are tuning in. So Lorraine Guzman, Sumasigagidza Sacramento, says, thank you so much and blessings to you for sharing your story. She says that her father is 92 years old, Juan T. Guzman from Santa Rita, Tautau Sumay. Umatungo amzo dan si Juan Guzman, Tautau Sumay?
Hunggan. He's a class of, I think he's a class of George Washington class of 1956.
And so, Hunggan, and we have more people saying thank you for sharing your memories and thank you for your service as well.
Okay.
Hunggan.
You're welcome.
And so, another question. Senor, somebody says, thank you for talking about what it was like to rebuild after the war, because many people only focus on the war, but not on what it was like to rebuild afterwards. And so, do you find that it was difficult trying to rebuild your family after the war?
No, I think the difficulty, we have passed the word difficulty. I think the road to recovery was very aggressive. We developed skills or attitude to move forward, and we don't dwell so much about the difficulty. We recognize the difficulty, but for us, it is moving forward and overcoming that past experience.
No. Okay. Otra cuestión, señor.
Sure.
Okay. Megay na Chamoru gi generasyon mo dyan amkot niya kinuhago man saunaw na gi servisyon marinero, Navy.
Okay.
Safati hago.
I'm Army.
Again, Army house. Safati hago. Why didn't you join the Navy?
Why did I join the Navy?
Oh, why did you not join the Navy?
Oh, it was simple. I was impressed by the Chamoru men that went to the Korean War. Many of them were just 4 years older than I, 5 at the most. And they came home as sergeant first class, staff sergeant. So I was very impressed with that. Additionally, before the Korean War vets came home, five of my uncles were in the U.S. Navy during World War II. Three of them served overseas. Two of them remain in Guam. I was impressed by their experience of travel. And for me, travel means adventure. So that was fundamental in how I developed an attitude about joining the service, is that I wanted to be a part of that adventure.
Oh, seduce Masi. Now, Senor, you mentioned Korean War veterans.
Hongad.
And somebody somebody has mentioned, you had just mentioned when we were talking earlier that Timanma recognized na Azui Imangera Gidzo Korea. They do not receive as much recognition. Can you talk a little bit about those who fought in the Korean War?
Well, for the Korean War veterans from Guam, their coming home to visit was welcome. We recognize that they were doing something very unique, and we always welcome back our veterans. I think the Chamoru overall attitude was one of supportive of the military people, regardless of time in history, whether it's World War II, Korea, or Vietnam. Whereas many places in the United States, the veteran is not welcome. But that is not true in Guam. The Guam veterans are always welcomed back by their family and friends. So they did not suffer from this indignity of being looked as an undesirable member of the community. We celebrate with them when they come home, and we celebrate with them when they're leaving either back to the battlefield or back to a new assignment. So we do not have a negative attitude about the veterans from Guam. They're always welcome home.
Seduce Masi. And so, can you talk a little bit about your Vietnam experience, your Vietnam War experience? Did you connect it to your World War II experience?
My Vietnam experience was kind of sad in some respect, because I lost my first cousin, Staff Sergeant David Guerrero Benavente, in November 23rd, 1965. He's the second Chamoru serviceman to die in combat. So that triggered a very emotional tsunami for me, trying to overcome his death. My own service in Vietnam, I did not have any serious problem with that, because by this time I had over 10 years in the Army, so I was a very well-trained soldier. So the transition from peacetime into the battlefield is not that serious a problem for me. For younger soldiers that only had 5-6 months or a year in the service, and then they're thrown into the front line, into a unit, that transition becomes a very serious issue for them. But I did not have that issue.
Okay. So when you did your experience in the military make you critical of the United States? Because I know that later on in life you came back and you joined protests. You supported things like Angel Santos and Chamorro Nation. Did your time in the military make you more critical, or how did you become more critical of the system or of society?
There's no contradiction between my military service and my duty as a citizen, and that my attitude about participating on peaceful demonstration against poor treatment of the indigenous people is something that I fully support. As long as I'm peaceful, I'm not involved in any misconduct or violence against the military. To be a member of a group that is protesting peacefully is protected by the First Amendment, is protected by the 14th Amendment. So my attitude in the military and my attitude about becoming a civilian has no contradiction. Each one of them has a priority and a little bit different on the mission. But being a participant is not a difficulty if you stay within the parameters of good conduct. You step out of good conduct behavior, then you have a problem. But as long as you're peaceful, you're entitled to protest and disagree. So I do not have a problem balancing my duties as a soldier and my duties as a retiring army. Only on the condition that I behave in such a way that I do not bring discredit to my military service.
Okay. And so here is a question from Michael Mendiola Garcia, Sumasca Gidza, California. He says, Buenas, senor. Sidus Masi, for sharing your story. What was it like to leave home for the first time in the military? And what was it like trying to keep touch with folks back home? So when you left Island, you said you went for training. How did you communicate back home? Did you write letters? Did you make phone calls? How was it trying to communicate back home?
Leaving Guam in 1955, keep in mind that was only 9 years after World War II. And it was only 5 years before we became an American citizen. So it was for me, it was a huge adventure. Getting on the airplane, going to Hawaii, undergoing training for 16 weeks. And so despite my attitude about adventure, I get homesick. My first time that I was trying to come to Guam, I took a 30-day leave and there was no plane leaving Hawaii. And I got on a ship and I spent 7 days of my vacation on a ship coming back to Guam. And that's how serious I was about coming back, that I would ride this transport ship carrying dependents and supplies, whatever, just to come to Guam. So it was the transition from being in Guam and then being away was a very challenging experience. But we all enjoy both the difficulty of trying to get here and then getting here, and then getting here is a big celebration. And the same is true during the Vietnam crisis. We tried to come home every 6 months, if it's possible. And we celebrate every day that we're in Guam, knowing that we're going back to Vietnam. And we celebrate with family and friends. We party every weekend. And because we miss our people, our family, and our friends, so we make every effort. And even today, the same dynamics is happening to the young airmen, sailor, Marines, Navy, and Army. They love the idea of going away. However, the idea of coming back to visit the family is a very strong card that they're holding. I want to go back and visit.
No, Sidus Masi, senor. Again, the Mahaleng, the Mahaleng, at did the Mahaleng, no?
Okay.
No, Sidus Masi. And so when you traveled and when you were stationed in different places, you mentioned that people would come together. Okay, guaha otro question por eno. Ko guaha inetnun Chamoru, inetnun guahan. So nowadays there's many Guam clubs. Was there clubs or groups for Chamorros at that time in the 60s or 70s or
the Chamoru organization started with the Navy people from World War II, and it was home ported in San Diego, California. So the pioneer group of men that went into the service in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, particularly those in the Navy, San Diego was one of the biggest Navy bases, and they established clubs there. Later on, Army units or men in the army, in army units throughout the United States, if there's enough of them, they would form a club. So I was a member, for example, in the 1970s and 80s in a Guam club in Hawaii and also in Monterey, California. So those of us that were in the military between, let's say, the 1950s to the 1980s, along the way, we belonged to a community that has a huge Chamorro population in the military. There definitely would be Chamorro clubs of some kind.
Mm. Okay, here's a question. So while you were away, did you miss Chamorro food? And when you were on that ship sailing home for 7 days, what did you eat? What was the food like on the ship when it took 7 days to get home?
My adaptation to American food, or things that we think as American, all started in World War II, because in 1944, 45, there were no markets in Guam. There were no stores for Chamorro people recovering from the war to buy what they need. So what we were getting was the ration that was intended for the troops. And for example, in 44, there were no rice available. So we were giving potatoes by the box load. They didn't say, here's 5 pounds, 10 pounds. They gave us a box that's probably 25 pounds. So lacking rice, you would either learn to eat potatoes and really like it, or you're going to go hungry. And I am not going to go hungry. So I learned to appreciate mashed potatoes, baked potatoes, any way that you develop potatoes, I'm okay. So my transition going into the Army, I don't have any adjustment. I welcome the menu from the missile in the absence of rice. But for some of our soldiers and men from Guam, transitioning into potatoes is not a happy occasion. They look forward to eating rice. And I not that I don't like rice, I eat rice on a regular basis, but when I'm away from home and the rice is not available and all you have is spaghetti and potatoes, I'm okay.
Sidus must say, some of the people viewing enjoyed. Zaniha na I kwentos mo na ipurenam. Sa pogo esta mampodsun hit no esti na Americano. Lo gichampot mo nuevo san para imanatsam ko mo nuevo esti ti mampodsun esta. Okay.
No, it's in a malangos palabra nila spam than corned beef. Tane pago el mate americano na taza latan satmon, taza latan sardinas. Pues half ni nayo ni militar pero satbay familia mo corned beef and hash. So the Chamorro people are very adaptive. We adapt to the conditions we're under. We will fight and adapt. So the ability to adapt, the adaptation attitude is fundamental to survival. Either you adapt or die. And we're not gonna die, we're gonna survive and we're gonna adapt. So this adaptive attitude that we have developed over the centuries of under different colonial control is fundamental to our success. This ability to adapt. We may borrow their language to survive. Adios hasta aquí. Because there's actually, I don't think there's a word in Chamorro that describes adios. Think about that, okay? think heavy. You're a linguistic expert, or trying to be. But there's no real Chamorro word for the word goodbye. I don't think so. I've never heard it.
No,
And if any of the audience are listening and have a new word to introduce to this conversation, we welcome your input.
no, si Diyos masi, Senyor. Si Diyos masi. Again, if anyone else has any questions or comments, again, please go ahead and put them. You're getting it's great feedback, and Senyor, siyempre agradece na todo hinasunmidyo isanagan minzo. Again, so Senyor, I want to switch gears a little bit though, and so for the recent Zangintihita Pasadzi, the recent exhibit here at the Guam Museum, you donated to be digitized hundreds of your pictures that you took of Nasion Chamoru protests and activism.
Okay.
And they were historical images. You know, there's very few images that are publicly available from that time. And so many people thought it was remarkable to see protests at Adelu, at Potts Junction, visits to Letexen. And so I wanted to ask you, how did you, after being away in the military for so long, how did you get connected to Angel Santos, to Nasion Chamoru, Chamorro Nation?
Thank you. Thank you for asking that question. In 94, I was in Manila, and I saw this small canopy with a Guam flag that was torn. And they were on the side of the road. And so my curiosity forced me to stop. And I said, "What are you guys doing?" Says, "We're collecting signatures for the Chamorro Land Trust." So I signed. And of course, I asked, "What's the Chamorro Land Trust?" So they explained to me what they were doing. So that was the start. And then I was invited to attend one of their meetings. And I quickly developed an attitude that I should help, because in my military service, I was in Korea, Germany, and Vietnam. And always what I end up understanding after my tour of duty is why was I in Korea? Why was I in Vietnam? Why was I in Germany? And it boils down to a simple word. We're there defending freedom. So I try to apply that attitude towards this group that's struggling, trying to fight the government to return the lands that were taken away, return of lands that should belong to the Chamorro people in the Chamorro Land Trust format. And so that forces me to participate. And initially, I wasn't looking for a position. My attitude was just to help. But along the way, somebody recognized that, hey, John is capable of doing this. So let's ask John to help. That's how I got to be involved in Angel's campaign. When he decided to run, he didn't have an organization. We're the poor group. We're the poorest of all people in Guam, okay? We didn't have money. So running his campaign was a challenging situation because I'm up against the establishment. We don't have any money. And we were referred to as the radical group, almost the undesirable. So that even forces me and my group to be more determined. And so with determination and a lot of help from other people, we were able to challenge the establishment, the established democratic people, and lost on the special election by 300 votes to Frank Santos Jr. But then on the next general election, we scored, and he got elected into office. So I was able to balance my military experience and my attitude about this group that is the RALDA. and I'm now, no longer in the military. So I was stable in Guam. I was staying in Guam with them. So that was a very challenging and rewarding time in the history of the politics for Guam, and particularly for the Nasion Chamoru, because that group also is a small group, and a lot of people were against us at the very beginning. When we did succeed in getting Chamorro land trusts established and lands that were illegally taken at an early time in history, suddenly we became popular. Looked at, okay, we understand now, but at earlier times, we were looked at like a bunch of troublemakers. Because Angel was the first time to ever challenge the military. Prior to that, nobody, and him being an ex-serviceman also understood that. But Angel was an activist even when he was on active duty. When he was at Anderson Air Force Base, the issue of overseas pay for military, if you're from the US, you get overseas pay, but if you're all Guam, you don't get overseas pay. So he fought things like that, and he was very successful. So he was an activist before he even left the military.
Sidus Masi for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And looking at those photos that you shared, yeah, it was a very inspiring time. What is your reflections from thinking back to that time? Because I even from talking to people who are, I mean, I was just a young child in the 90s at that time, but it was very new and dramatic and different to have that style of protest.
Okay. The protest, particularly about Park Junction and in relationship to the Air Force and the community. It used to be that from the end of World War II, or at the end of World War II, Chamorros cannot go into Route 3A, because at one time at the bottom of that hill at Retidian, that used to be a submarine communication center. So it was off limits. Later on, when the base closed down, Route 3A was still under Air Force control. And the Artero family, one of the core members of the protest movement, by the way, is a fellow by the name of Antonio Artero Sablan. Antonio had been fighting the Air Force for the return of their land. So prior to our movement, Chamorros cannot go to Retidian. You can only go to Retidian if you're in the military. The Artero family were forced to get to Anderson Air Force Base, get an ID card to allow them to go to their land. And I'm really offended at that behavior, that here is a Chamorro landowner, and you need to get a permission from Anderson to go to your property. If there was ever an injustice, that is injustice. It's like segregation in the United States. You need to be a voter, you need an ID card. And if you're black and don't know how to read, you cannot vote. So by putting a literate requirement to vote as an example of keeping people out, by forcing the owners of the land in Retidian or Runa to go to Anderson Air Base to get a pass to go to your land, that is for me a great injustice. So those are the kind of behavior that I encounter that I'm totally against. This is an injustice, a pure injustice, because we are Chamorros, right? So that forces me to be more active in the movement with Angel.
No, Sidus Masi. Thank you for sharing that We have some more questions, and one of the things that somebody is asking about is, of course, the Guam Combat Patrol.
Okay.
The Guam Combat Patrol. And so, Nenga, my Mully Brianna is saying, I just learned last night from my grandma Rose that her father, Juan Kibitsai, was in the combat patrol. And so he was from Inalahan. And so they were, of course, Chamorros who went out trying to find a local unit that went out trying to find Chamorros, Japanese soldiers in hiding. She says she finds their example fascinating and inspiring. And of course, you work to get recognition for the Scouts and the Guam Combat Patrol,
Yeah.
correct? And so, do you want to talk about it? I have a picture that you shared. I can put it on the screen
Yeah.
for
You have
people.
a picture?
So go ahead and talk, and then I'll put it on the screen for people who are watching the live stream so they can see it. And no Hallwoods and see Governor Berdalio.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so go ahead and say a little bit about the combat patrol
Yeah,
and then your work with them.
During the second Bordalio administration, I was the special assistant to the governor for military and veterans. And governor was very aggressive in recognizing the veterans. And we were able to get the Marine Corps to give these combat patrol members, making them part of the Marine Corps. And they were giving recognition for that. And out of that aggressive attitude of the governor's office, we were able to, give them the recognition, the public recognition that was lacking from an earlier time, because they were just overlooked. But they were so well regarded by the Marines that the leader of the patrol, Juan Algon, was awarded the Silver Star. And the Marine Corps don't give away Silver Stars. You have to prove yourself, regardless of the occasion. So that's how important that small group of people. And one of the key players in that is a fellow by the name of George Wistek, not George, Felix Wistek. And Felix's father, when the Americans landed in Guam in 1944, Felix either 18 or 19 years old. Man's half German, half Chamorro, standing about 5'11", well built. And he was so angry because his father was incarcerated in Japan. And so Felix and Mr. Argon and the rest of that crew, George Flores, Mr. Cruz, and a few others, were very strong members of that group. And they're dedicated. They're men that go out night and day looking for Japanese stragglers. And some were wounded. Mr. Flores got wounded. There's another fellow there that got wounded. I can't think of his name right now. But that was a very strong indicator of how good the Chamorro soldier is before he even enlisted. He was a civilian. He went about looking for a Japanese. He needed very little training. All he needed is a rifle, and I go hunting.
No, Jesus.
Oh, and incidentally, my father and his youngest brother, not youngest, but his second older brother, were two scouts on their own. They did not belong to this group, but they were hunting Japanese themselves, even after it was no longer legal. My father and his older brother would secretly go out looking for stragglers. If they indicated there's a straggler in an area, they would hunt him down.
Oh yes, Sidus Masi. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think the Guam Combat Patrol and the Guam Scouts are part of Chamorro history that does not get enough attention. And it's to the point now, man mapus esta
Yeah.
todo. And so, but it's one of those where angin tita sasangan ni historia, angin tita tutugi papa, angin tita nalala. Y historia siya pues,
And
man malala fa siyempre. Timatungo na man mamala na
I know
historia.
because, and part of our problem was you should have existed 25 years ago. You would have captured all of these things that you're asking today. And you have captured the opportunity to know Mr. George Flores from Diego, Mr. Bercocosa, Mr. Cruz from Essen.
Mm-hmm.
So our record keeping of history of the people of Guam was poor before you came into the picture.
Mm.
Your group now, or this group now, okay, collectively, you're gathering information. And it's difficult for you because many of the informers, those that can give you good information, are long gone, members of the combat patrol.
Mm-hmm.
And that particular picture where I'm a part of that group.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks for your research group that captured that. I found a picture saying, oh yeah, that's Mr. B. He was doing this. And that's because in this case, let me share with you, by the way, how I got to be with the governor's office.
I'll put the picture back up. Here, put football. Go ahead. Put football.
How I got involved in this veterans business was after I retired and came home. I belonged to a small group of people from Dededo that were Democrat that were supporting Governor Berdalio. When Governor Berdalio won the election, everybody got a job except me. So maybe 60 days after the election, and he got sworn in, I didn't have a political job. I didn't have a job. But somebody in the group finally got smart and says, what are we going to do, John? What qualification has he got? He said, oh, John's retired from the military. So somebody got smart. So how can we fit him? So they came up with a title, Special Assistant to the Governor for Veterans and Military Families. And so everything that comes into the governor's office involving veterans or military families became my responsibility. Send that to John and tell John to fix it. And it was a very interesting because I got challenging jobs. Like, for example, are we still on the air?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
For example, I have an occasion where the governor got a call from a family in Sudan and says, we're missing a soldier. I said, what do you mean missing a soldier? He says, he was supposed to be in Guam. He flew out of Honolulu. His wife was left behind, and then she flew later, and then the wife is in Guam, and the soldier is not in Guam. So the governor called me and says, find out what happened to him. So I called Hawaii and identified myself who I am. And I said, this is the story. A soldier was on a plane headed for Guam. 5 hours later, his wife got on another plane, and the wife is in Guam now, but the soldier is missing. Where is this guy? They said, oh, sir, 4 hours out of Hawaii, he had to return because he's got mechanical problems. So he went back to Hawaii. And so we end up with those kind of situations where the family's up in arms. And where's my son? He's missing. And so those are the things that I get involved in fixing. We had a soldier from Guam got killed coming out of the Egyptian Sinai Desert. And as soon as I got word that We lost a soldier. I grabbed the governor and said, "Sir, we just lost a soldier. We need to go to the family." And we went and visited the family, give the family our condolence from the governor. The governor was with me. And then the governor told the family, "If you need any help, if we can help you, this is your contact. John is your contact." So those are the kind of things that I got involved as a result of my military experience. And handling those kind of situations was part of the things, part of my duties as a senior NCO in the Army, is handling affairs regarding the veteran or the soldier or the soldier's family.
Oh, Jesus Masi Senor. We are almost out of time.
Okay.
We are almost out of time. And so I want to give you a chance here now just to share any final thoughts that you might have, especially because this week is Liberation Day.
Okay.
And so for you, you are somebody who went through the real Liberation Day. You were 7 years old, 7 años, Guina Champo. But you are also somebody who spent decades in the U.S. military serving the United States. You are also somebody who has protested in support of Chamorro rights. And so you are somebody who has stood up for democracy and felt liberation and freedom and fought for it in so many different ways. And so, what is your reflection? Your thoughts on Liberation Day? You'll be 90 next year.
No, yeah.
You'll be 90 next year.
This coming August, next month, I'll be 89.
Hungan. And so, any thoughts that you have to share for the generations of today? Imanhoben Pauko. What do you have to share?
I'm very optimistic with the new so-called generation. They're better prepared to face the future of the computer technology and all the other technologies that's been developed since the computer. So we're now in a very different world. And so I am hopeful that and confident that they will continue to move forward and make progress, because the Guam of today is very different from the Guam of 82 years ago. Not only from a technological standpoint of view, but even from an economic standpoint of view. The economy is very different today than that of 50 years ago. So the future is challenging, but I'm very optimistic that this new generation of Chamorro leaders and young upcoming leaders will continue to focus on the future and improve the life of the community. That should be their goal. How do we improve the life of the community? When it comes to the issue of security, we're in a very difficult situation, being a military base out in the Western Pacific, the only one of its kind. And so it will be challenging in the years to come on how the security issues would impact on this community. Right now, as we speak, we have the camp blocks almost ready to be completed. It will bring changes to the community when it is completed, because we'll have a Marine battalion or bigger on island. We will become a bigger target for China. China would always be a problem for us in the many years to come. And it will be interesting to see how the China-US relationship is going to develop in the next 25 years. But it's my hope that war will never come to this island and never come to this young Chamorros of today. But that is my hope. And I hope that we continue to strive to develop, to move forward, and make the very best of whatever resources we have.
Si Deus masi, Señor. Si Deus masi por ifinatomutalo para este na episode fanatso.
Yeah.
Hunggan
I'm happy. Are we over here?
Chapman. Besengani todo este siya a Diyos, pues behutsum mi live stream. So, si Diyos masi, Señor, tatlo, para ifinatok mo para este bonito na konversasyon, who agradeci i experience mo, who agradeci i sinangan mo, para hamso todos ni en eega dyan, kung okesti, si Diyos masi lokui a Diyos,